This is the Ed Hour. Alan Kaplan and I are the co-hosts on this show that we do monthly. And we do this from our sponsor, not sponsor, but our partner, if you will, Prototype Prime. Prototype Prime is an incubator here in the city of Peachtree Corners, provides a place for startups to begin from infancy, if you will, and then move up into other places like Atlanta Tech Park, or spaces they have just expanded to allow them to further grow. It's a great opportunity for startups to be here and to learn from each other. Prototype Prime, thank you guys for allowing us to use your podcast studio.
And welcome again, everybody, to our fourth episode of fourth show of the Ed Hour, an education-focused podcast designed to share with the community the many wonderful things that are happening in our schools, teachers, and students, and also to explore things that impact our children's education. And today we're very, very thankful and lucky to have three wonderful guests here, parents of students who each have chose different educational options for their children. And so we'll go through and have everybody introduce themselves, but we have one parent here that sends their children to the International Charter Academy of Georgia, which is a public charter school focused on Japanese immersion. We have a parent here that has their children at private school, Cornerstone Private School, and a parent that has homeschools their children as well as some other educational options. So with that, ladies, thank you so much for being here this morning. And if we could just go around and introduce yourselves, that'd be wonderful.
Thanks for having us. Hello, everyone. My name is Yolanda Houston. I have two beautiful girls who attend the International Charter Academy of Georgia, where the focus is Japanese. I'm excited to be there. I am a mother of four, actually. I have a 22-year-old, 11, 6, and 5. I was educated in both Detroit public schools as well as parochial schools in Detroit, Michigan. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Nice.
Hi, and my name is Rosie Schlicht, and I have 5 children. They're all boys, ages 17 to 7, and our 2 oldest sons attend Norcross High School, so they're in public school. However, they attended Cornerstone Christian Academy along with my 3 sons who are currently at Cornerstone. It's a K-8 Christian school. My husband and I are products of public grade school, middle school, and high schools. We both do have college degrees and graduate degrees. And thank you for having me here.
Thank you for coming.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Kassar, and I have 8 children. My oldest is 21 and my youngest is 2. I have 2 in college, and we have done a mixture of private school and virtual public school and mostly homeschool. And my background is I went to private Catholic school, and then I went to a public university, UC San Diego in California. And I think that's everything.
That's cool. Thank you for coming. Alan and I, our kids, and I'll talk for myself and Alan can speak for him, but my kids are public schools. I grew up in a public school in Brooklyn, New York, several public schools, right? It's elementary, middle school, and high school. I went to City University also, and that's how I learned and became what I became, my career and all that. So I'm a product of public school, and my kids are also at this point.
And I'm the proud father of 2 young boys. I have an 8-year-old in 3rd grade at Peachtree Elementary School and a 10-year-old in 5th grade at Peachtree Elementary School, where they started out in kindergarten. And I, too, went through the public school system, and so love our school and love our community and all the different school options that we have. So
I probably should say I missed 3 kids. Sorry about that. 1 kid at, that makes sense, right? I have 3 kids. One at Paul Duke High School, just entered there. They all the 3 kids went to Simpson, Pictonville, and Norcross High School, except for my 15-year-old who's at Paul Duke now. 2 older kids, one's at Berry College and one's at Georgia State University.
Awesome.
So that's where we are. So this is great to have a cross-section of parents talking about educational choices today, talking about how and why we chose where we are. And some of it went a little different. I want to start a little bit with Rosie. I'm sorry.
Okay.
With Rosie, because you actually started a little bit with homeschooling for about 18 months.
Yes, I did. Well, actually, I first started with my older two children in public school. And the difficulty I found was the class ratio, the student-to-teacher ratio, was about 32 students to one teacher. And I volunteered quite a bit and just noticed the teachers having to spend just a lot of time with some children with special behavioral needs and some of the like. And so I really felt like they were not challenged enough and weren't getting enough attention. And so that's when I began to homeschool them. And I loved homeschooling. I had a large co-op in a different state in Florida. And really enjoyed it. And because I was choosing to homeschool, I decided to use faith-based curriculum because we're a Christian family. So that's where I started. When we moved to Georgia almost 9 years ago, we moved to Atlanta. My husband felt, and I felt that now moving into Atlanta with more educational opportunities, that maybe we should look at alternate educational options. We lived in Dunwoody at the time, but my husband found Cornerstone Christian Academy in Peachtree Corners. That was 9 years ago. I toured it and fell in love with the environment and the teachers, the staff.
And I know the original headmistress, if you will, headmaster of that school, Deanne Crawford, she did a great job there.
She did. She helped birth the school about 18 years ago. We came in when it was 9 years old. She's now in charge of admissions. We have a lower school principal, a middle school principal, and then we also have a headmaster now. We've grown to 350 students. Wow. We have a staff of 52 teachers. It's just an excellent environment. And my kids are really thriving, excelling. My older two sons who graduated from there and are now in Norcross because they are pursuing the IB program. They've been taking AP courses since they entered the school. They're getting 4.0s. They're excelling. The teachers comment on their high confidence level, low stress level, their proficiency in writing. They are also the number 1 and number 2 cross country runners at the high school, and that's 4,000 students. So they're also spending quite a bit of time training. They also are part of Fellowship of Christian Athletes, which is a Christian club outside of school. Actually, they meet in the mornings early. And then they spend a lot of time with their brothers at home. So I am thrilled at how well they transitioned from homeschool to high school, which feels like college to me with the amount of time they spend. But they're still in bed like by 9:30 in the evening. They're not pulling all-nighters like some of the other students we hear about because I feel like they were just so well prepared.
Yeah. So let's stick a little bit on the homeschooling. Let's get to that too. Kathleen Kassar, you have how many kids?
8.
Oh, 8 kids, and you're homeschooling all of them?
Well, I homeschooled all of them 1st through 8th grade. And then when we reached 8th grade with my oldest, who's now at Georgia Tech, we decided that it was a right fit for him to go to a private school to expand his horizons a little bit more, to get more of the things that our homeschoolers don't get offered, like the sports programs, the AP classes, things like that. And he was really academically advanced. So I needed to send him somewhere where he could get, especially with him being at Georgia Tech, he would love math and science. So he really needed to have that challenge. And so he went to Pinecrest Academy, which is a Catholic private school up and coming. And we drove that distance, which was a trek. But he loved it. And after that, he went to Georgia Tech. And, that was the right choice for him. And then since then, I'm homeschooling. As the kids are homeschooled, they know that they have a choice when they get to high school, that we have to kind of figure out what they want to do. And so as my son was in high school, I would take the other kids here, look at this, look at that, come to this football game, come to this high school event, and they would look, and I would try and give them the option of what they felt they were being called to. And then my second daughter, she said she did not want to go to high school. And but I didn't, having so many other children, I could not give her the rigor just with me, and spread so thin among so many kids. So then we turned to virtual school, which was I had done virtual school with Georgia Cyber Academy, which is a public school, and I had a really good experience with that. I like that. Towards the end, I think as the grades got higher, they were focused more on the test than they were on anything else. So that kind of turned me off a little bit to them, because I got the sense that they didn't trust the parents. Mm-hmm. And I understand that they have to check and make sure the parents are doing what they're supposed to be doing, but it became so much testing. It was defeating the purpose of why we were homeschooling. So, but this going to this other virtual high school, Colby Academy, which is actually based in California, that has been fantastic. Their teachers can be anywhere all over the world. Their peers, my kids have friends all over the nation, all over the world, and that's a really neat thing. When there's fires in California, they're online checking with their friends to make sure they're okay. All these, really expands their concern, because they know people there now. Of the whole world, they know somebody. Their professor lives in Germany, or so they're really caring about the whole world in a different way.
A global look.
They have a different perspective, and I think that's been fantastic. And then, so I have two now currently in Colby Academy in high school, and then that allows me to focus a little bit more on the younger ones.
Okay.
So.
Yolanda?
Yes.
You're in charter school.
I am.
A whole different ball of wax.
It is. This is a first for me. My daughters originally attended a school called Atlanta Trilingual Academy, and we were very impressed. So with that school, they learned Chinese and Spanish. 45% of their day was Spanish, 45% Mandarin Chinese, and the difference in English. And it was very rigorous. Their 3-year-olds are reading. So we came with that type of rigor. Transitioning into a public charter has been a challenge. However, very exciting, because one of the reasons I chose the International Charter Academy of Georgia was for the language and the total immersion, and it was free.
And it's Japanese immersion.
Japanese immersion. So we get to acquire a new language. They offer Chinese as a supplement, so we're able to keep up with our Chinese, and we can just supplement more Chinese and Spanish.
And how old are your kids now?
5 and 6. They're 5 and 6. So we were excited to be a part of the birth of the International Charter School of Georgia, Charter Academy. I'm sorry, I'm calling the wrong name. There is an International Charter School, a Charter Academy of Atlanta. They're located in Roswell. We went there too. At some point, I've been to a lot of schools and toured a lot of places, so I can compare. What I'm most excited about is the opportunity to learn a fourth language. I'm excited about the teaching approach that comes from the Japanese culture. They use, I believe, the Singapore math. They use the abacus. It's advanced. It is really advanced. So I'm excited about what they have to offer.
Do they teach cultural also, like respect and
of that culture?
Yeah,
they do. So the kindergartners learn 80% of their day is in Japanese. So they start off with even outside shoes. They start off in the morning. They take off their shoes and they have indoor shoes, and they have circle time. It's kindergarten, and they teach them every aspect. It's the same structure as they have in Japan.
Okay.
So.
And so the International Charter Academy of Georgia, if I understand correctly, that's the only public Japanese charter school in the Southeast, as I understand.
It is.
And that's located right here in Peachtree Corners.
It is. It's an amazing school. They have an amazing campus, and they have extraordinary teachers. They have an extraordinary principal, Miss Woodcock. she is amazing. So I'm what they call, I've been told I'm a tiger mom because I track the kids from everywhere. You know, they have tutoring, they do this, they do that. And so I'm on the phone with her all summer long, you know, hey, you know, what's this structure going to be like? How many kids are in the classroom? You know, what curriculum are you using? And she was there to answer every question.
So that actually brings up my next question, which is, for all three of you, as you began to explore a new option, whether it was your first option with your kids or whether it was going from a previous education option to a new one, what were some of the main questions or concerns that you had before stepping into a new educational option for your child or children?
I can go. I think for me initially, since I felt like I was able to challenge my older two boys with homeschool, I didn't know what the future was going to hold, but I know that I really wanted a faith-based, Christ-centered curriculum, and I really didn't think it would be possible to find a school like that used scripture-based curriculum in every class, yet Cornerstone had that. The other thing I was looking for was a better student-to-teacher ratio. With 5 children now, I know how my time has to be split up. Just like Kathleen and her 8 children, you have to be very flexible. But I knew also as an adult and an educator, nurses or educators, how do you do that with over 20 students or over 30 students? I just don't know. I don't believe that's possible. I really don't. So when I heard after touring Cornerstone Christian Academy, where my kids have 12-1, 11-1 currently right now, and it's always been that way. Last year, my kindergartner, it was 10-1. You're talking about a lot of focused attention on top of Spanish class, writing specialist, teaching skills every week. We also have technology every week with all grades K through 8, even video production as you get older. My kids learn how to do PowerPoint presentations at a very young age. They're confident. They all learn how to be leaders, regardless of where they start. You will be a leader by the time you come out of this school. But I think one thing I really loved from my background of kind of being a more anxious kid was this is such a safe, peaceful environment that encourages kids to learn, and these teachers really look at how can I come alongside you and teach your child better. With just 12-1, I can really talk to my teacher if I need to and discuss, Samuel had a rough morning today. How is he doing? Or, she can tell me he's struggling in this area of math. Can you work with him at home? That's not happened very often, but my kids just are, I believe, really getting the attention that they need, on top of being spiritually educated. So,
I thought that was very interesting that you said that the school offers a writing specialist and a technology specialist. That was one shortcoming of the private school that my kids attended. It was language focused. The kids were, of course, reading and doing math 2 years ahead of their age, but I noticed that there were holes in that curriculum and that school setting, and some private school settings, they don't offer the complete package. So that's interesting to know that about Cornerstone. And when considering schools, private to public, that's what I found, that at the International Charter Academy of Georgia, they have all of that as a part of their curriculum. So that's neat. I've experienced not having that, and then going into an environment that is not private, but them offering those services. So those needs are being met. But I am encountering the student to teacher ratio. It's there's a little to be desired. But I imagine that some people will kind of fall off.
So, and Kathleen, I'll get with you in a second to answer that same question. But before we get too far away from this, I just want to interject our public school perspective, my public school perspective as well, because we love our public schools. Right. I think as we discussed earlier, any of the educational options, there's going to be a trade-off somewhere. Mm-hmm. And as I talk to different parents that have made different choices than we've made for their kids, one of the things that sticks out to me is that for some students and families, having that smaller ratio in the classroom is a big piece. And I've always thought, particularly of our religious private schools, that a great reason why parents choose that is to either have a lower student-teacher ratio or to have exposure to a particular religious denomination. For us, what we like most about the public school is that my children are getting a truly global education. So, Kathleen, to interject that piece on how your kids are getting that global exposure, about 71 to 78% of the kids that go to Peachtree Elementary School are Title I, so economically disadvantaged kids. So, for my kids to have exposure and navigating people from many different backgrounds and how they were raised is a great asset for my kids, and so that's a great asset I see for my kids in public education. One of the trade-off is there are more kids in the classroom in the public schools as a whole. I would say our school in particular does a great job of doing differentiated learning, small group learning, where they parse them up into their different levels within the classroom, and the teacher doesn't teach to the class or to the middle, which was our greatest concern before as we were exploring public school as an option, but they teach to the individual levels in the groups, and then they also do pull-outs to bring kids into special areas if they're excelling in math or other areas. So from our perspective on the public side, that's, there's the one trade-off, but how we offset that and what my kids have a takeaway from that.
Right. It's interesting because public school, for me, I grew up in Brooklyn, larger class sizes, right? Different type of teaching, different, it was more memorization to a degree. It was really schoolyard learning in a way because, denser population, there's just so much going on. So arriving here in Peachtree Corners back in 1995, I guess it was, we were looking for a place with public school because we knew we couldn't afford, and we didn't even think about private school at that moment. That sort of came a little later down the line when we asked our kids whether they would like to go to private school. And they chose not to. They wanted to follow their friends into the next school, for example. But Simpson Elementary, for our kids, provided excellent education. When the IB program started coming into Pickneyville Middle School, so one of my kids was, unfortunately, the way he tracked, every time they changed the curriculum slightly, he ended up being that semester's kid that had an experiment with that change.
Oh, no.
So that was a bit of an issue. But when they arrived in Norcross High School, which is an IB program, and it was rigorous, right?
It
rigorous
is.
program. When they finally went to college, the first year or two of college was easy.
That's what I've told my boys. I think it's going to be easier.
Way easier. They felt like the kids around them, like what schools did they go to that they don't know how to write and you need me to help you? That was the biggest part of it. But the writing, not knowing how to actually create a good essay, and maybe how to study, because there's a certain way you have to study.
Correct.
Each of them have a different style.
Rico, as you're talking, you mentioned something I think that's really important, is that cost.
Yes.
That is a huge factor in what choices parents have.
Right.
And I know that, if we could have whatever we want, we might choose differently, but we always have to, find what we have available within our means. So, for us, we really wanted to have that Christian education, but when you have 8 children, you can't afford private school for 8 children. That's not an option. And so that's why we actually started turning to homeschool. And, if you ask people why they don't have large families, the number one reason is cost. They would have more children, they would have bigger families, but it's very expensive. And homeschool, I think, is one way that people can actually still get that student-teacher ratio There are lots of other benefits of it. Like my children become teachers to the younger brothers and sisters. And when you teach something to someone else, you master it, you learn it twice. And they also have a very strong bond. The family, they will play with, my kids play with any age group because they're used to playing with kids of all ages. They aren't, and sometimes they'll go around the playground or something and other kids won't play with them because they're not the right age, and they kind of look at me and I was like, it's okay. Right. You can always kind of tell a lot of times homeschool families, they don't see the, like what grade are you in and, whatever, because they're looking for any friend because they want to play, and anybody is, they'll play with you. So they're the benefits. And of course, the number one thing is that we can really integrate ourselves in our faith, whatever faith it is that you all are choosing. We happen to be Catholic. We can go to Mass together. We can do the sacraments together, and we can do the gospel in the morning together. And it really keeps our faith from being compartmentalized.
Yeah, that's great.
Kathleen, do you do this like? There's the unchurched, if you will, but there's also the unschooled. Do you do a schooled or unschooled? I have friends who
unschool, but I actually have a minor in teaching. I have my master's in the teaching of writing, so I'm not an unschooler. I'm very much a school. Like we have to have a curriculum, and we have subjects, and every child has their own desk and their own books, and we have a schedule, and we have to finish what we've set out to do, or they don't get a summer. So
that's some incentive, right?
Although, if you think about it, do you follow the school year? I'm just curious.
Yes, we actually do, because they're in many other activities. My children are in MISO, which is Metropolitan Youth Symphony Orchestra. They're in swimming. They're in choir, then all these other activities, which, of course, we're always looking for more activities to do as homeschoolers, but all those other activities are on the school calendar. So to kind of follow that, we do follow that school calendar, but we're going to go to the beach in October when the prices are cheaper.
Right.
That sort of thing.
That is the beauty of homeschooling. We took summers off, too, and we were done with school by 1 o'clock in the afternoon every day. Right. So then we could go do tennis, soccer.
Right. It allows you a lot more flexibility.
That is a nice...
So Kathleen, I was glad to hear you talk about affordability, because I think that does impact a lot of families considering private school. I know that when we were first exploring our school options, we're Jewish, and we were considering maybe a Jewish private school for them. And as we looked at the costs, and we're self-employed, we thought, well, we could sacrifice and figure out a way to make that work. But then we explored what the other options were, and so we ended up having a lot of confidence in what we were seeing for our kids in public school. But our commitment was to, if they weren't going to get that immersion and exposure to our religion via private school, that we committed to be very involved in our synagogue and to offset it some way. And so, just as you found another option, to meet your kids' needs, we went through a similar process.
Great.
Saying, well, we want all of this, but how do we make it work? And so
economically,
very glad for you to hear how you walked through that process for your family and found a solution as well.
Right. And I feel like we're always encountering. Every year, every month, how can we keep things balanced? I mean, everyone has their idea of what the ideal family life. I like how, we're always assessing, are we balanced? Are we spending enough time together? Are we spending too much time with sports or not, or enough? Service opportunities involved in church. And I was going to comment on the cost part. I never thought that we would send our kids to private school ever because of the cost. And when my husband was researching, he found that Cornerstone is less than half the cost of a lot of area private schools. With 5 children, like Kathleen having 8, I didn't know if we could ever afford to send our children to private school. But that's the nice thing about Cornerstone. It's really affordable for us. So thank goodness we were able to do it because of the tuition costs being lower than most schools.
Do you mind sharing what is
Sure,
the
it's about $8,000 a year versus $20,000.
That's a good average. And what a lot of parents don't know is that even a lot of really big, well-known schools offer scholarships. Yes. A lot of times you figure, Woodward Academy, it's not an option. International.
That's correct.
We
do have scholarships at Cornerstone. And then, are you guys familiar with the Georgia Gold Program?
No.
Is that where your tax dollars go to the school?
Yes,
to your tax.
We have 100% participation of all of our parents, where they do, as a portion of their tax dollars, we can ask that a certain amount of our tax dollars be put into Georgia Goals funds, and then those funds can go directly to our school. Mm-hmm. So we are able to provide scholarships for students in the area. Mm-hmm. So we have many of our students going to school. Of the 350 students we have a good chunk of our children going through the Georgia Gold program, getting Georgia Gold dollars.
And it affords you the opportunity to have the education that you want at a discounted price.
Yes,
I have an interesting story. My 22-year-old, he did private Montessori's in Michigan. We came and we dabbled in public schools for a minute. It wasn't a good fit for him. So we found a school called Horizons. It was located at 1900 DeKalb Avenue. And Horizons was an amazing experience. They had a saltwater pool, and it was taught seminar style. And, we found that for him it was a calm environment. He did very well with horticulture. We swam with the manatee, but it was a bit pricey. For me, I was a single mom at the time, and they would barter and trade. Mm-hmm. You could come and teach a class, and
really neat.
It was, you had people that were like me that were there, and then you had some that were from very affluent families who had the money, and it was a nice mixture. Right. It was a very nice mixture. So to anyone who has a desire to attend a private school or just a school that has some alternative options, always ask, is there a scholarship, or is there another way that we can make this work? Because a lot of private opportunities are there, but as they say, a closed mouth won't get fed if you don't ask.
That's great.
Sometimes you have to be creative.
You do.
Have to be creative.
Well, I want to ask you ladies this question. A little bit about culture, a little bit about religion. Mm-hmm. So one of the homeschool moms I talked to over the weekend, a mom that I know from our neighborhood, she's secular, right? Okay. Secular homeschooling. And she talked a little bit about some of her friends, like one of her friends was secular and preferred the secular homeschool, but sent her child to a Christian school for a while. It was actually Montessori, so it was faith-based, right? So I was like, how do you handle that? How do you handle creationism versus evolution? Because this is what they liked. There's also cultural, too. Japanese culture, way different from American culture.
Very different.
There's a whole respect thing about that. And I know people would like to see a little bit of that type of culture here in the States, but it's a very different culture, right? So how does that maybe affect some of what you're seeing in school, or that your preferences are?
For me, this is my first experience with the Japanese culture, so I'm learning. As the kids come home, I'm learning more about the culture. My experience more so has been with the Chinese culture, and I can tell you that the difference in education, they have a lot of more discipline than a lot of American families in terms of education. So they seek that in our culture, that balance. But it's worked in the opposite effect in my family. Is teaching. It's a really good foundation for education. My children don't know anything different but to study. They don't know anything different.
They're young, yes.
They're young. The 6-year-old who was 5 at the time, just going back to a time last summer or summer before last, I would tell her we have 3 hours of Chinese tutoring with Fei, and then we can have fun at summer camp. And she would cry if I said we can't go see Fei. She didn't know anything different. She didn't know that, but it comes with, let's say they have to learn in a very clean environment to clean up the space, and it has to be order. There's a lot that comes with that, and it's worked for us.
Do you see the same thing? I mean, obviously in the homeschooling, you control that.
Right,
that aspect of it. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think that as a group, I'm going to kind of generalize here, a lot of homeschoolers feel that, especially, not just Catholics, but Christians, and I'd say, Jewish, any homeschool that has any, belong to any faith or denomination really feels that the world is kind of against them, that the world is, like, I'm talking about the television, the media, like in terms of the types of violence and sexual programs that are coming out in television and movies, and we've had school shootings and all, like the violence level and the level of sexuality is just pushed at such a young age. What was happening in school when I was in high school is happening in elementary levels now on school buses, and it's kind of crazy. And I think as parents, I think there's a general concern. And so when you talk about culture, I think within the cultures, like we have Latino friends, we have Asian friends, we have African American friends, but we're all kind of united against. There's this we need to kind of like push back against the aggressive. I don't know what kind of culture I don't know what would you call that? It's demonic. I don't know. It's like it's too much. It's like anti-parent, anti-family. I guess you'd say it's anti-Christian. Yeah. I don't know, but it would be anti.
It's very counter-Christian.
Yeah, but I think it's counter.
It's prejudice against.
It's family. Everything that I'm trying to teach my kids about, what's good and upstanding and everything, is kind of displayed.
You're competing.
I'm competing.
That's
right.
Good description.
It's competing against what's coming on the television. So we've actually chosen, we don't have a TV.
You limit it.
We don't have a TV. Now, my kids are totally fine. We watch movies, but we don't get commercials. We don't get TV. And, all the junk and all the wasted time that comes with that. We have plenty of screen time. They are very in tune with the world because we have the internet and everything else. But, and homeschooling allows me to kind of say, here's the line. This can't enter my house. This, it's just, where is it going to go? How much further can we go? How much further can we go as a what's acceptable in our culture, in American culture?
Right.
So there's there's different cultures in ethnic cultures that we connect with, but then there's and I think with those cultures we are uniting, and even with other faiths and other religions, against this anti-family. I don't know how to describe it. Maybe you guys have a better word.
I was going to say, it's been a cultural shock for me going from a private environment, which is very isolated. You have people who have similar goals and you're like-minded.
Right.
And you all share the same thing. So for me, I call it the mommy club. We would convene our meetings in the morning in the parking lot, and we talk about, what are you doing with your kids? This is what we're doing. We're doing this. This is a supplement that we're doing. And we kind of control the environment. We know what they're seeing in terms of screen time. If there's screen time, we control their friends. We can control all of what's being inputted. But when you come into a public school environment, it's a melting pot.
Right.
You have no idea what your child is going to come home with. But let me go back. You have no idea what your child is going to come home with, even in a private school setting. I had a little girl where her mom was very free with, let's just say, the birthing process. And I remember going to the playground, and this little girl had the kids reenacting birth, and I'm like, mortified. No. That's when you learn, because I'm an older mom compared to some of the younger moms, and you in your mind, you're like, can we talk? Hey, she's an amazing little girl, and you're doing an amazing job. However, other parents may not want their children to know where babies really come from and how they're born. And this is what I witnessed, and I witnessed it more than once. And can you please talk to her?
Yes.
With this experience at the new charter school, I was terrified because I'm like, oh my goodness, who are you going to school with? But when you choose a language immersion, what you find is you have more so a lot of like-minded people. Although they're coming from different backgrounds, the goal is to raise a global citizen who is tolerant and has understanding or seeking understanding of other cultures and other races. And you find that, all kids are the same. And most parents have the same goals. And So she hasn't come home with anything. They haven't come home with anything that has just been such eyebrow raising. But that was a fear.
So with it, as you describe public schools as being a melting pot, and you don't know necessarily what your kids are going to be exposed to on a daily basis. For us, we found that that's been wonderful teaching moments.
Exactly.
That because any busy parent, I think we lament that we never seem to be able to spend enough time talking with our kids. Which, to me, talking with our kids is the key to raising a healthy, successful child. And our busy lives, don't give us enough of that. I don't think any parent would say they have enough time talking to their kids. But those moments when my kids come home and learn something new that I didn't know that they knew or wish they didn't know now, have really provided us some incredible conversations and teaching moments. And again, every child's different, but my boys have been able to understand it, put it in context, and it just continues to build them into making great decisions for themselves. But it doesn't work, I don't think, if we're not having those conversations with our kids, regardless of where they're exposed to things that are outside the teachings of your own family.
I was going to say, I don't mean to be so talkative, but I think that's the beauty in it. You really don't want... You do want them in a controlled environment, but only for a short period of time.
Right.
Because you can't... When they leave you, there's the world, and you don't want it to be a cultural shock. You just don't want that, because they won't know how to handle it. And that's where those moments come in, because you can walk them through it. Well, is there a Santa Claus? Well... Is there a Santa Claus? So we just went through this last week. So I have my little niece, I adopted her, and she comes from a school, and I have her with me, and she's in the car, and she says, "There's no Santa Claus, is there, Auntie Yolanda?" I said, well, different people have different beliefs. And then she says, there's no tooth fairy either. And is it, Auntie Yolanda?
So I wonder sometimes who's teaching who. Half the time I think I'm teaching my kids, but most of the time they're teaching me on how to be a better parent or how to navigate certain things.
Yes. They teach you a little crisis management when they ask you those questions.
They do.
Well, I see two things we're talking about. One is culture as in ethnicities,
yes.
And then we're talking about societal influences in general. I feel like for culture... My husband and I are from middle-class families, but I'm a first-generation American. My parents are immigrants, one from Cuba, one from Bolivia. So being first-generation American, parents who didn't understand cliches like 6 1/2 the other, or fill her up, but what I've tried to... Or what I've loved about Cornerstone and with the public high school is the exposure of different ethnicities and cultures. We are a Hispanic family. I'm bilingual. I also, being a Christian family or a faith-based, we believe, I believe heaven is going to have all colors of people. Heaven isn't an all-white place, so to speak. But I love that my children had this... first, this value of I'm going to love everyone, and the greatest leader, Jesus gave us that example, that the greatest leader is the greatest servant, the most humble servant. The last will become first. First, usually, or they will become last. That's from Scripture. So I like that my kids are in this environment where they're serving at Ivy Hall, which is a nursing home, at Ronald McDonald House, which is, provides places for families to stay while their children are in the hospital. They go do those things through the school and have service opportunities through church. But then also they've learned all these Christian values, and I've seen it with my 2 children from 8th grade, going from 300 students to 4,000 students of all different economic and cultural backgrounds, everything. They have loved it. They've thrived. They love the differences. They love being exposed to everything. And it has, like you said, given us opportunities to just talk and to discuss tough topics. That's been wonderful. I love that about the public school, that they've had just an exposure and been able to interact and care about all kinds of people.
So we've talked about some of the great things and reasons why you've made the decisions you have to send children where they go to school. But we also, at the beginning, said that there's, like any decision, there's a trade-off. Mm-hmm. So I'd like for each of you to share, given your current educational choice, what are some significant or trade-offs that you've seen in that you don't have because of that choice?
I think for homeschooling, the number one trade-off would be access to sports programs. That is a huge thing. Right? I even called the Department of Education for Georgia and asked them if it was possible that my children, because we're paying tax dollars, if we could join like Norcross swim team. And she told me that it's very tricky. So she said that if it's a club, if the sports group has made a club, homeschoolers can join. Because I said, well, that's strange because first they told me no. And I said, well, that's strange because in Forsyth, I know that some homeschoolers are participating in sports. So why can't we have it here? And she said that if it's a club, a designated club, then other people from outside the high school can join.
That's like Norcross has a water polo club.
Oh, right. Yes.
I think at one point. So it is a club. It's not sanctioned by the high school, although it sort of works through the high school.
Right, it works through the high school.
Right. So it's not a high school team per se.
Right.
Okay.
So in my mind, I think that this is something. This allows us a little bit of wiggle room. I think that more homeschoolers need to work with local high schools and petition them to form clubs so that they can have, because having homeschoolers is an asset, because we're just bringing another sense of another diversity into the school, and we have maybe more time to focus on that sports. There's some excellent homeschool athletes that are kind of like banned because the sport isn't a club. So I think that we really need to work as homeschoolers to allow our children to have those kind of opportunities by encouraging public schools to form clubs. But the number one thing would be just having access to sports programs. Music seems to be a different category. Like I said, my children are in MISO, and there doesn't seem to be as many boundaries on that. But, that would be, if they wanted to do marching band, we couldn't do a marching band. That sort of thing. And again, it's sad because all of our taxpayer dollars are going into that. So it kind of feels a little unjust that we can't let our children participate.
Rosie?
So what are some of the...
What's a drawback?
The drawback.
Now that you've...
Of private school?
Trade-off.
Well, I don't think there's a drawback for me since we can afford private school. From going to public to private, I don't feel like there's any drawback. I will say from going from homeschool to private school is just, I know my older boys, and sometimes when I look at the schedule, I feel like they could spend, they maybe don't need to be gone for 7 or 8 hours a day. I do feel that way, but that is what it is. I just, it's a long day. So that would be the disadvantage. And same with public school. I'd love it if my boys could get home a couple hours earlier instead of having to take PE. They're already running like 8 miles a day, so do they really need PE?
Let me tell you, Norcross's cross-country team runs way longer than a lot of other high schools.
Yeah, you probably see my 2 boys out there all the time.
Miles, rather. A lot.
Okay, let's see. Some of the drawbacks from public to private. What I will say is that with charter schools, I think that there should be more funding to offer more options for the schools. So like for the International Charter Academy of Georgia, the student-to-teacher ratios are low compared to many other public schools. So that is an asset, but they actually could be lower if there were more dollars put in place. An advantage, I know we're not talking about it, but you have a choice. A charter school gives you an option. You don't have to choose just regular public schools. Other than classroom size, another drawback is, I agree with you, I believe there's some wasted time in the day. Truly. I think that the kids can be pushed they can be taught so much more within the time of the day. They can be doing so much more. Not to overdo it, but their minds are sponges. I think that there's an opportunity to teach them so much more.
Especially if they're interested and want to learn that particular subject.
They don't know any different. Their minds are whatever way you train them. They don't know any different.
When they first come to you.
When they first come to you.
That's the key.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm sitting here and I'm amazed by something, and we moved here from Naples, Florida. Very limited school options. I can't even tell you, like one private school.
In Naples, you're talking about?
In Naples, Florida. And education dollars, very few in Florida. Here in just Peachtree Corners alone, it is astounding to me that you've got a great public school system with Gwinnett County Public Schools here, with Paul Duke. You've got Norcross that has the IB program. Then you've got a fair amount of private schools, Cornerstone Christian Academy being one of them. And then I would love to hear Kathleen comment about how large the homeschool population is in just in Peachtree Corners,
it's
though.
Huge.
Yes, that's what I would like to know. But just look at that, just in our beautiful city alone. I love Peachtree Corners, especially with so much of the new development that's going up over by the Forum, that there are so many wonderful opportunities here, even for preschools. But yeah, Kathleen, what about your the homeschooling population just in Peachtree Corners, not Atlanta?
I don't know what the exact number is, but I know just in my neighborhood, there are just, just in our neighborhood, there's just 12 homeschooling families, and that also includes our hybrid schools. Some homeschoolers do hybrid school, where that's where they will send their children to a school for 2 days a week, and then they homeschool the other 3. So, I mean, again, another educational option for people who want to jump, kind of test out homeschooling but don't feel confident. They can do hybrid schools.
And that hybrid school is a homeschool oriented.
It's homeschool. It's for, it's accredited and everything, but it's kind of like they call it hybrid, because you're half you buy into their curriculum, so you can't choose your curriculum anymore. That would be the downside of that. The school has chosen the curriculum. They have teachers there who are meeting with your kids 2 days a week, and they give you, this is what you're supposed to accomplish on the other 3 days of the week, and you go home and you finish it, and then so it's a tandem teaching experience.
And in high school, at least the high school level, we have 2 different schools here, right? Norcross and Paul Duke. Paul Duke is a 4-day-a-week school.
Okay.
It's Friday being a digital day.
Right.
So, which is interesting, because you have 4 days a week, which is a little longer than the normal public school, and then you have Friday where students can either go back to the school and do the digital day, or they just do it from home, and they have to complete by Sunday midnight, I think. So they have the Thursday work, the Friday work. As long as they're completed by Sunday midnight, they're done.
They're flexible.
And which is cool, because with certain kids, like my son, he's very particular, he's very organized. He does his stuff, he never misses anything. And he's learning a lot. I mean, because he has the ability now to be able to use our digital setup, to be able to go online, to do all sorts of research, to be able to do the stuff. And he's done, and it takes a long time, because they don't fuss it down, it's a full school day on that Friday. So it's different from Norcross.
Yeah. So it's still talking about homeschooling for a minute. 2 questions. What would be, if you had to identify one primary reason why people choose to homeschool, or the most common reason, what would that be? And then, do you think that most parents that homeschool, what school system did most parents go through? Were they homeschooled themselves, or did they go through public school? Do you see any common denominator there that rises to the top?
For sure, the number one reason why people homeschool is for they want their child to be raised in the faith that they are in, whether it's Jewish or Muslim, or there's a huge Muslim homeschool population. I mean, whatever the faith is, they really want to instill that faith with their children, and the cost. So, there are great schools in all the different faith communities, but there's the cost. So if you're strapped by the price tag and you want to have your child in a faith-centered curriculum, and by the way, there's so much curriculum. We have every summer there is a in Marietta, there's a huge homeschool conference. It's ginormous. I mean, it fills up the Cobb Galleria. I mean, and the amount of people that go through that is just, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, if all the homeschoolers suddenly went to school, the system would fall apart.
It would crash.
It would crash.
What would we do?
Yeah, what would you do? Wow. I don't know. The student-teacher ratio would be in serious danger.
Right, because the tax dollars would be the same.
Exactly. The tax dollars would be the same.
That's a good idea. Wow.
So you should thank your homeschoolers.
Yeah, right.
But and then the second thing you asked me is that nobody I knew, very, very few, have come from a homeschooling background. Like, you know, I was never homeschooled. If someone would have told me that I was going to homeschool, I would have laughed.
Oh, I know.
But, you know, that's the way, the path, you know, you kind of discover things on the way. You know, so how I got to homeschool, I sent my child to kindergarten. It was like a neighborhood church kindergarten, and the teacher, my son actually bit someone. And I immediately wanted to call and apologize to the other mom and, you know, talk about it. And then the school told me, we're not going to allow you to contact the other people to apologize, and we're not going to tell you if this happens again, because we want to emphasize the positive. And I said, what? I have to know what's going on with my child, and I have to, you know, be involved and be a part of that. So someone gave me a book, and that's how I started homeschooling.
Well, I'll just tell you, thanks for answering that question, because you just undid a personal bias that I had, because not having known a lot of people that homeschool, I always just defaulted, well, they just don't want their kids in public school. Right, or they're afraid of public school. So that was my personal bias. So to hear the real answer, I appreciate it, because that makes a lot of sense. To really, and I always associated exposure to a particular religion as being achieved through our religious private schools, and to know that that's a primary reason why a lot of people homeschool, you've enlightened me. So I really appreciate that. Yolanda, do you want to add something in here with what we're talking about, or do you have some questions with each other on what we're discussing?
Well, we were talking earlier about the homeschooling. It seems like you are in control of your child's education. There's a sense of power. So for me, I have a mom who's a principal at the school, Milan International. It's a Montessori, total Chinese immersion school that my kids go to in the evenings and on during the summers, and the principal homeschool her kids. And I was telling you earlier, well, they're in college now. Wow. They're in college now, but she homeschooled them, and she keeps saying, Yolanda, you know, you can do it. And I'm like, no, you can do it. I cannot. I want to still have a relationship with these kids. I want them to like me at some point. And she gave me all of her materials. The Math You See was the curriculum.
Oh, that's what I used when I homeschooled. Yeah, Math You Can See.
Yeah. Math You Can See. And with the manipulatives.
Yes.
And it's an amazing.
You know, it's great that you brought that up with the using manipulatives, hands-on learning.
Yes.
That is something that Cornerstone actually does. All our teachers are trained in the Orton-Gillingham method, which involves all the sentences, but it allows kinetic learning. You don't have to sit in a desk at a chair. They move around the classroom. They can sit on the floor. You know, boys, I have 5 boys. They don't want to sit in a chair. They want to sit on a ball, or they want to stand up. That's all just fine, but they're constantly doing hands-on learning and interacting. So it's not like what I remember, which is you sit at your desk, that's it, and you look at the book, and you take turns reading, and then you take the test. So that is one thing. You know, as a previous homeschooling mom, I don't have the money to spend on all the technology and hands-on materials and the smart boards that they have at school and all the iPads and Apple computers. I can't afford all of that, but I can't afford to pay the school to provide it. So that is really something wonderful and special about Cornerstone. So I feel my boys can be boys, and they're learning with all their senses.
One other quick aspect about homeschooling that you brought up, Yolanda, is that as a mom, and you know, I've been homeschooling for 15 years.
That's awesome.
I know a lot of the curriculum, and I also have a huge support group. So if one child isn't learning with this curriculum, I can switch. It's not a big deal. I've done 3 different. We've done Saxon math.
School, you can
right. We can switch. We've done Math UC. We've done Singapore. We've done Saxon. So I mean, you really can figure. You get to realize that it's not one size fits all in any kind of way. And you can. And if this child needs more help, in reading, or we can find another book. We can find and all you do is you reach out to your now email, your homeschool community. And you talk to other moms who have. It's like this wealth of knowledge that you can reach into. So when you say you can do it, but you're not alone. That's the thing.
That's the thing.
You're not alone.
You're afraid.
You think you're going to be doing this all by yourself, but there's a learning curve. You have to learn and you have to get out there. But you only won't be able to do it if you do it by yourself.
The great part of the... I'm sorry. We could go on.
Right now.
We're at the end of the hour,
okay.
Actually. I'm sorry, Leslie. But what I want to ask each of you ladies, because we're literally towards the last few minutes of this, I want to ask you a question, and you got a minute to sort of respond. What advice do you have for parents interested in exploring your option of what you've done, and what's the greatest impact you've seen on your child that surprised you? So either one of those two or both of them, if you got a minute to be able to answer that. Rosie?
Okay, I'll start with the thing that most surprised me as a result of Cornerstone, and I think that would be that all of my children know who they are confident in who they are, and they're leaders and not followers. And the reason why I say that is because all my boys are different, but I have a couple who are very quiet, naturally what I would say is introverted, yet they can be leaders. I just was concerned of those couple being followers. So I love that they have that ability. Also, because I have some of my boys who tend to be pleasers, and then I worry then they're going to be followers. And so they've been able to really establish who they are. And I know my younger sons are working on establishing who they are. So I love that. And then what was the first question?
The first question was, what advice do you have for parents interested in the same?
I would say tour every school. Don't just look at it on the internet. Go to the school. And I think for a homeschooling environment, go spend a morning with a homeschooling family, and also connect with your community and see what co-ops are available in your community, because in my experience, homeschoolers, you need outside support, so you need to make sure you have a good community available for that.
Okay. I would piggyback on that. For the people who are considering homeschooling, you will only be successful if you find a co-op, if you find a community, if you find, there are so many of them. And that, because those people will become your wealth of knowledge that are going to help you guide through this new, adventure. And they'll also become... everyone talks about socializing your kids and everything. My kids have no problem. We have too many friends. So it's don't worry about. I think the number one thing people are, my child is not going to be socialized. That is such a big giant myth. If you're involved in community, if you're involved in other things like sports or music or whatever it is, you'll find that that's not an issue at all. That's the last problem we've ever had. And then so it'd be just to connect to community and try it. And again, it's not for everybody. Homeschooling is not for everybody. So it really is something that, I don't look down on, I have, 4 other siblings and none of them homeschool, and I think they're doing a great job with their kids. So it's not like I think homeschoolers think we're better than you or whatever. No, it's a calling. And if it fits your child and it fits your family and you feel called to it, you should investigate it. But if, you may not feel called to it. And then the one benefit would be just the way my children work together, our sense of family.
Well, I'll go really fast. I'm most surprised by their ability to learn so many new languages and to make so many new friends. Someone that's looking into Georgia's charter schools, I would say jump right in. It's an amazing experience, and volunteer and make it what you want it to be. Be a community, make it a family, make it work. Find out what the vision is and do your part to make it successful.
And then I'll jump in here on the public school side, advice to parents, and what we did. We heard a lot of rumors about our public schools, and once we realized that those were coming from people that never sent their children to the school that my children were were thinking of going to. So what we did is kind of piggybacking off what you said. We got involved in the school the year before my kids went to school there. We joined the school council. We started going to the school and understood that it was a wonderful school and that my kids would fit in very well there. And so your advice, not just to get involved in the school or the educational option prior to your kids being there, and then once you are, stay involved, stay engaged, and make sure that you're helping that educational option succeed for your children and help your children succeed in that option. And then lastly, the one surprise I had with our public schools is just what an incredible, great job the teachers do. It's incredibly strong teachers in our public school because of the spectrum of children that they're working with in the classroom. So that was the greatest surprise, how well they do differentiated learning and how strong the teachers are in our public schools.
Excellent. This was a great hour plus. Wish we had more time. Feel free to share this with your friends online or to share the podcast. The podcast will be published tonight and will be on iHeart, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube. We'll be putting it out there. Visit PeachtreeCornersLive.com and you'll be able to see the video eventually after tonight's post or tomorrow, and then the podcast itself. Ladies, this is fun.
Yeah, and just want to thank you all so much for joining us. I want to thank everybody that tuned in to watch us or that will tune into the recordings in the future. But really, we could have gone on and on, and we're so grateful for y'all being here and adding perspective and helping people understand. Here in Peachtree Corners, we have some many incredible educational options, and we encourage you to explore and seek out those that are right for you and your family.
Yeah. Visit back again, like our Facebook page. If you share this and people are watching it, or if you're watching this off YouTube, feel free to visit our Facebook page. You'll get notification when we go live. Great hour. We'll be back again the Thursday after, I believe, the third Tuesday, because the fourth Tuesday is Prime Lunchtime with City Manager Brian Johnson, which we do monthly also. This was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.